Hi, I'm Jacob Gallucci, and I'd like to make my predictions this week for the conference championship games in the NFL. And first, I'd like to talk about last week's games. Last week, I went 2-2. I actually picked the Broncos to beat the Ravens. I think most people did, but that was an unbelievable game. It's one of the best playoff games I've ever seen. I think it was just back and forth the whole way, and it was just crazy. I'm shocked the Ravens beat them. I really am. And I picked the Packers to beat the 49ers, and that turned out to be a mistake too. And I mean, Colin Kaepernick had an amazing game last week. He's so good, and it was just one of the best performances by a quarterback I've ever seen. He had 181 yards rushing in that game. That's a new NFL record in any game. Like it's the most rushing yards a quarterback's had. I'm sorry, it's the most rushing yards a quarterback has ever had in any game, playoffs or regular season. That's unbelievable. I picked the Falcons to beat the Seahawks, but that was an unbelievable game too. It was just crazy. I really thought the game was over after the third quarter. The Falcons were killing them. It was 27-7, and the Seahawks came all the way back, and the Falcons, it was just a monumental collapse. And at that point, I was like, you got to be kidding me. I was like, the Falcons are never going to win a playoff game with Smith and Ryan, but somehow, some way, they regrouped and they ended up winning on a last-second field goal, and it was really an exciting game, but just the Falcons blew it. They came very close to blowing a huge lead, and that would have been an absolute disaster. The Patriots beat the Texans. I picked the Patriots, and I think we all knew that the Patriots were going to win that game. Houston gave them a good fight in the first half, but New England was just too much. In the second half, they just pulled away, and they ended up just beating the hell out of Houston in that game. And the final score was 41-28, but the game was never. The second half was not that close. New England was killing them in that game. And well, anyway, this week I'm taking the 49ers to beat the Falcons in Atlanta. I think, Colin Kaepernick is so good. I mean, if Green Bay couldn't stop him, what makes you think Atlanta's going to stop him? I mean, Atlanta has a good defense, but I don't think they'll be able to stop Kaepernick. I mean, Kaepernick has a good arm, and he's fast, too. He's a dual-threat quarterback. And the Ravens and the Patriots, I'm taking the Ravens to beat the Patriots. I actually am. It'll be a close game, but I think the Ravens will win the game by 7 points or less. But Baltimore will beat them. Unlike last year, it's a rematch of last year's AFC Championship. That game was also in New England. Baltimore lost that game. I have it here. They lost that game 23-20. They had New England in that game too. They outplayed them. But Lee Evans dropped a touchdown in the end that would have won the game for Baltimore. I still think that was a catch though. But it was just a weird play, and in the end, Billy Cundiff missed a field goal badly. If I had kicked it, at least I would have been closer. It was one of the most horrible missed field goals I've ever seen. It wasn't even close. It was that bad. Fortunately, Cundiff and Evans they're not even on the Ravens anymore. But I'm taking Baltimore to beat them this time. I think they can beat New England. Even though it's in New England, I still think they'll win that game. And the 49ers were in the NFC Championship last year. The game was in Frisco, and they lost to the Giants in overtime. And Kyle Williams was the Niners punt returner that day only because Ted Ginn Jr. got hurt. Williams is actually Kenny Williams' son. Kenny Williams is the now former GM of the Chicago White Sox, and it was just he pretty much cost him the game. He had a fumble on a punt return in the fourth quarter and in overtime. His punt in overtime was just awful because the Giants picked it up and they were deep in field goal range, and they ended up winning that game. And just Kyle Williams, I mean, if they hadn't had him that day, I think the Niners would have won that game. I really do. But I'm taking the 49ers and Ravens to win this Sunday. And in the Super Bowl, the 49ers versus Ravens, my money's on the 49ers. Kaepernick's going to eat the Ravens alive, too. The Ravens have an old defense. Ray Lewis, he'll be retiring. And they have Ed Reed as well, Terrell Suggs, and Kaepernick's going to eat that defense alive. I really do. I really think that's going to happen. And I firmly believe that the Niners, they're really good. I think they're the team to beat. It'll be cool to see an all Harbaugh Super Bowl, Jim Harbaugh versus John Harbaugh, but I'd have to give the 49ers the nod to beat the Ravens. If both these teams win this weekend, I think the Niners will win the Super Bowl. And Kaepernick, I think, will be the MVP. And I feel bad for Alex Smith. He had a good year, but Kaepernick was he's just better than he is. If it wasn't for Smith's concussion, I think the Niners would still be in the same position, but Kaepernick is so much better than Smith. There's no denying that. Anyway, I'm sorry for rambling here, but this is a big week in the NFL. I've always loved the championship games, and historically they've been more competitive than the Super Bowl up until the last 15 years. In the old days, like in the 70s and 80s, the Super Bowl was usually a blowout, but in recent years, the Super Bowl has been a lot more competitive, which makes it a lot more interesting to watch. It's a lot more interesting to watch, I would say, and I'm looking forward to the championship games, and they should be fun. Okay, I'll be back tomorrow with 2 new videos, and until then, take care.